Hey everyone, and welcome to another Pep Talk. My name is Jen Walker-Wall. I'm the founder of Work Wonders Careers, and I'm here today to offer a little bit of insight into our job search process and framework, and I'm really excited to share with you. I even have a little slide today to help explain how we came up with a step-by-step process to help our clients tackle the job search process. If you're not familiar with Work Wonders Careers, we help mission-driven professionals pursue careers with meaning and impact through career coaching, strategy, and resume writing. You can visit us online at workwonderscoaching.com to learn more about what we do. And we'd love to hear from you over there, so feel free to drop us a note. Oh, hey, Nicole, it's really fast on mobile, I guess. Usually I'm here talking to myself for a little bit before anyone else pops on. So thank you for being here. If you're here and watching, please feel free to say hello and let us know where you're from. We'll just wait a few moments for people to join us. I just want to share, in case this is your first time watching one of our pep talks, what we like to do is pop on here and offer some really actionable advice. That's the whole point. Hey there, Peter. We're not here to talk job search theory. We're here to help you put the process into practice. We know navigating the ups and downs of your career can not only be really overwhelming, but it can be really isolating. So we love to bring people together to talk about their shared challenges and also talk about solutions that will work for you. And before I dive in today, I want to share that our Spring Accelerator, our Spring Job Search Accelerator, opens up for registration tomorrow. Hey, Pam, welcome. If you are on our mailing list already, you'll hear all about that tomorrow, and I'll go into a little bit more detail at the end of today's pep talk. Oh, hello, Merlinda, Sharon, Beth, hello. Welcome, first timer. Always nice to have you. It's 4 a.m. here. I am flattered. I hope you have some caffeine with you. Okay, so let me just see here. Can people see the slide? I know it's probably going to be a little bit small. Hello, Belinda. I just want to make sure. This is the framework that I'm going to be sharing today while we're waiting. It's good to see you too, Pam. I'm so happy you're here. I feel like it's really nice to see the same people over and over again. That's nice. And new people are wonderful too. You'll be a familiar face in no time. Hello from Brooklyn. Nice. Awesome. It's great to have you all here. Thank you for joining me in the middle of your workday. Perfect. First time. Awesome. Okay. So like I said, I'm going to say a little bit more about the Spring Job Search Accelerator that we're offering at the end of today's pep talk. So please stick around if you are interested in hearing a little bit about that. Hey, Deirdre, welcome. San Jose. Awesome. What I want to talk a little bit today, right? This is called the 6 steps to transform your job search. And what this really is the process that I created when I wanted to create the curriculum for our group program, Work Wonders & Co. So this is my baby, essentially. This process, this framework is something that every webinar we do, every group program we have, this is the framework that it is based on. And the reason we have this framework and the reason it includes the things that I'm about to go over that you can probably see on the slide here is that what I started noticing when I was working with people one-on-one is that it wasn't always a problem about strategy. A lot of people are I need help with my resume, I need help with interviewing, and that's a huge piece of the puzzle, right? Is strategy, executing those interviews well, and knowing how to network, and having a good resume, and knowing how to use it. Those are all things I kind of put into the strategy bucket. And please don't get me wrong, it's a huge part of what we do. It's included in our framework. But really, people were having some other non-strategy related challenges. They were struggling to manage their time. They were struggling to make decisions. I mean, even which jobs to focus on. That felt really hard, or what to do with their resume. They were lacking confidence in managing their search or making decisions or even putting themselves forward as candidates. They were feeling awkward and salesy about reaching out and asking for help. And so obviously that did not bode well for their networking efforts. And there was lots of procrastination. And I say was because I noticed this early on, but procrastination is a big challenge for people. Procrastination, perfectionism, there were all these other elements of the job search process that really were were huge challenges for our clients. And so it was really important to me that our process wasn't just like, here's how to write a good resume, but we have to kind of address these other challenges, these issues around time. I mean, we're only going to be successful if our clients can execute the strategy. So it really wasn't enough for us to just share our expertise on the hiring process. We had to figure out how to help people not just change their knowledge base, but change their behavior in the job search process. And that's really the key here. I mean, I know a lot of people are here for quick, actionable tips. And so we're going to offer that today. But really what we want you to do is to be changing the way that you job search. And that's a much different kind of change than just tweaking your resume. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about how to change your behavior and your job search approach and manage a lot of very, very common pieces here. And what you can notice from the slide right away is that it's a circle. It's nonlinear. So you ever felt like the job search process is doing the same things over and over again? Like you're in really good company. And I want to kind of normalize that and help you make sense of that. And also know that when you revisit some of these steps, even if you don't have a job offer, you could be in a fundamentally different and perhaps even better place than you were before. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So the reason it's also a circle is that you could actually kind of technically start anywhere. And so sometimes people are like, what do I do to get started? I like to start with reflection, self-reflection. So that's where I'm going to start. I think if we're coming at this from like a strategic perspective, that's the best way. But if you've started somewhere else, that's okay. I'm just glad that you have started. I will take starting anywhere here. So let's start with reflection for today's overview. So you'll notice that we're actually going to come all the way back to this circle, but we're going to start with self-reflection. So if you ever thought to yourself, okay, I'm ready to start my job search, I'm ready to apply for X and Y kind of roles, and you log into LinkedIn and you're like, I've kind of done that. I'm not sure if I meet those qualifications. Maybe I'm kind of curious in something else. Maybe you're not qualified or feeling unqualified. And you just kind of like log out or you email yourself jobs and like you never really bothered to apply. Or maybe someone will ask you, like a friend or a mentor, like, what is it that you want to do next? And you're just kind of struggle to like articulate with a clear vision what it is that you would in fact like to do next. This is where it's really critical. If you're just starting out and you're looking for like an early goal, an early win, like being able to articulate what you want more of, want less of, is really, really critical. And so many people, when they start their job search from a place of urgency, like get me out of this job type urgency, we'll skip this step and just try to get out. And because we're so focused, not just on helping people be selected in getting a job, but helping people choose themselves what is going to be a great fit for them. I love for people to take the bandwidth that they might have and the timeline that they might have and to spend some of that time getting really clear on the experience that they do have, the value that they do have, the achievements that they do have, so that you can kind of digest that and communicate that effectively along the way. We can't just dive into the talking about ourselves, or at least most of us can't. Most of us, when people are like, tell me how to pitch myself, I'm always saying, who are you talking to? So we really want to give ourselves space in this reflection phase, not to think about pitching ourselves, but to think about what we really want. So many people have been through so much in their careers. They've lacked mentorship. They've struggled to be happy. They've had coworkers and bosses they don't like. They've been poorly treated. So many people come with experiences like this. And so like giving yourself a chance to say like, this has been disappointing. I was hoping it would be like this and it's not, can actually be very liberating, right? We don't want to carry that throughout the entire job search process, but like we do want to acknowledge what's worked and what's not worked. So we're not just going to like hyper focus on the positive things. We're going to say like what's not worked and what can we do to kind of maybe minimize that in the process here as well. The other thing about reflection is it helps us decide where we're going to spend our time. So we're not applying to all of the jobs. We're deciding how we're going to spend your time based on priorities that you can also articulate in this stage. So our clients spend a good amount of time here, but it doesn't take much time here to get ready to move to the next step of the process either. It's also a step that we revisit. So usually we have a series of exercises that we walk all of our clients through to help them start to articulate and recognize what their achievements are, what their attributes are, what they're most proud of. And then we take it to the second step, which I will talk about in just a minute. But here's what I want to say to people who may be here and are really feeling like there's a huge sense of urgency to make that next step, to land that next job. Don't skip this step. Even if you only spend a little bit of time here and think really clearly about what you want more of, what you want less of, what kind of experience you can leverage. That's another thing, is when we document all of this experience in the reflection phase, we can turn it into transferable skills for other kinds of jobs. But it's very hard to just talk about your transferable skills without actually outlining or documenting some of that experience in order to do so first. So you may also revisit and refine some of your goals and insights as you move through the application process and the candidacy process. So I'll talk a little bit about that when we come back to this stage as we wrap up under assessment. So step 2 is also really critical. And I would say we probably spend most of our time on the front half here with our clients, which is this piece is really about understanding not just your goals and needs, but other people's goals and needs, because this helps us turn our internal process of reflection into an external process that generates interviews and connections and good connections and conversations. So it's really critical that we give ourselves permission to document who we are, what we want, and then we come into this next phase where we think about how can we be compelling and tell our story in a concise and clear way to other people so that we get traction in our search. So to do that effectively, you really have to get into the mind of the hiring stakeholders. For us, that means we spend a lot of time with our clients focusing on those qualifications and learning how to speak to that. Learning how to reframe and position your experience in a way that's going to say to this person, yes, I can meet your wish list of expectations here. And it's not about just talking about ourselves because that's usually more information than potential employers need. So what we really want to do is hone that narrative given the needs of a particular job so that we are highlighting the most relevant achievements. And it's so helpful when you have all of this self-reflection writing, whether it looks like journaling or exercises or just notes to yourself about, in response to some prompts or your previous work experience. It's so much easier to revise that into something that's strategic than to try and just be strategic and clear and concise from the get-go. As someone who writes resumes for a living, as someone who helps and coaches other people through the resume writing process, it takes a little bit of time. So there's no reason to expect that you should just be able to blurt out something that sounds perfect and is very clear and very concise. It takes a little bit of time to learn the strategy. If you've come before, you've probably heard me talk about the summary of qualification strategy that we use with resumes. You've probably heard me talk about how I restructure resumes to really ensure that they're easy to read and easy to scan quickly. That's what happens in this phase. It's all about, we've already know who we are, right? We've articulated our goals and what we're bringing to the table. So the other piece of this is how do we compellingly convey this to other people? Now, please don't mistake this for a place where we want to twist ourselves into a pretzel just to impress and land the job, because that's not necessarily what's going to be a great fit. Part of what revision is about and this articulation is also having boundaries and expectations for the job at hand. So it might give you a chance to say, to be honest in your answers. We want some level of honesty and candor without trying to just say, yes, we'll do anything. We want to make sure the opportunities that you're pursuing align with what you want. So just keep that in mind. This is really about doing this process with integrity and doing it in a way where maybe you have an interview and you really have delivered your answers well, but you're realizing it's not for you, or you're realizing there's a little bit of a misalignment. And maybe being at peace with that or recognizing it as a growth opportunity. So again, this isn't about twisting ourselves into something we're not. This is about understanding people's needs and putting the best case forward for your candidacy, so long as you're still interested in pursuing it. This is where we learn to tell concise stories, relevant stories. It's important that we learn to listen to other people's needs in the hiring process. And it's really not, I don't want you to walk away from today and be like, this is how you impress people. It is, in fact, how you impress people. But what I really want my clients to do is to resonate and connect with others. And I want them to also experience that as part of the hiring process. So this isn't just about impressing people. This is about finding a mutually beneficial working relationship between you and a potential employer. not everyone deserves to be impressed by you. So that's my humble belief. And I know Nicole will agree with me here. So I want to encourage you to think about how to position yourself in a way so that you can be responsive to other people's needs and also pay attention, that they're responsive to yours. Faith has asked a question here. Let me pull this up. How do you leverage your strengths so that they are also in your resume? So this is a good question, and it really depends on the strengths and the job at hand. So this is really where we would think about your strengths in the self-reflection piece. And then when it came to the revision piece, I would say, what is this employer asking for that you have? So we're not going to present all of your strengths. We're going to try to present the strengths that you have and the experience that you have in a way that speaks to the needs of the hiring manager. And the way we figure that out is to look really clearly at that job posting and to ask ourselves, like, what are the attributes they're looking for? What are the years of experience they're looking for? What are the different skill areas that they're looking for? And to distill your experience and strengths into something that helps you, speak to that quickly, not simply to just present a list of strengths. Faith, you can go over to our website, workwonderscoaching.com. We actually have a few different price points, so you can take a look at that. But thank you for asking. Okay, let me keep going here. If you have any questions about anything you're hearing, feel free to drop more questions in the chat. I'm happy to answer as we go along. So we've done the self-reflection. We're revising our resume. We have a good summary of qualifications. And now we have to submit that resume. So this is really where a lot of our original clients' roadblocks would come in. Sometimes they'd have a really good resume, but they'd still be afraid to submit it, or they wouldn't make time to make those critical revisions. So I want to talk a little bit about what is important in the job search process. I'm going to say this multiple times, and I've already said this on Pep Talks before, but the job search is kind of fundamentally about two things: communication and interaction. So a job search that takes place in your head, right? Like wanting a new job, needing a new job, reloading LinkedIn over and over to see if there's any new jobs. Those things can take up so much time and energy, but they are not the things, unfortunately, that move the needle in your job search process. So like wanting a new job does not necessarily get you a new job. So the action that we take and the way that we set ourselves up to take action in the job search is so critical. And we can save ourselves so much time and energy by getting clear about what we need to do and finding ways to do it. So I also don't want to oversimplify or minimize why taking this action can feel challenging for people, or that this isn't something that people just kind of struggle with and learn to manage. Like there's all kinds of ways that this manifests for people. So I'm not trying to minimize it. To some degree, what I think I see here is that people are comfortable with the discomfort that they know in a job they may not like versus what opening the door to new opportunities may be. So something I hear a lot is, what if my next job is worse? So that is a big fear that a lot of people carry around. And of course, if that's something you're worried about, you may not be taking the right kind of action. So what I like to suggest to people is that we take imperfect action. Just acknowledge that we're not going to be perfect actors in this process. We're going to make mistakes. There's going to be typos. Things aren't going to be awkward. That's just part of the process of meeting new people and pursuing new opportunities. And also, we're going to treat this imperfect action process like a data collection process. We're not committing to a new job. We're simply trying to put ourselves in a position to gather more information about the job, to meet people, to hear them talk about their needs, to hear them talk about their experience in the employer. And that's what imperfect action is really about, is giving yourself permission to not execute the job search perfectly, but to execute it so that you can learn more about what you need to in order to make a good decision for yourself. And just to be clear here, there's more than one good way to write a good resume. Truly, I believe that. There are awkward moments in interviews, even in a good interview. That can totally happen. I actually just had a client who was like, I got a job, I got the offer, even though I thought it was awkward. And if you've interviewed people, especially at scale, like I did it as a job for many years, awkward can be endearing. It's not the worst offense in an interview to have some awkward moments. It can be humbling and charming, and it can be funny. It can be a lot of different things. So awkward moments are nothing to be ashamed of. They can be avoided and minimized to some degree, but they're kind of just part of the process of meeting new people and having interviews. And there are always going to be learning and growth opportunities. So you could always be a more succinct speaker. You could always learn to write your bullet points in your resume a lot more concisely, but like you don't have to do all of that at once. A lot of our clients, we treat this like an iterative process. Our clients within 3 to 4 practices are often like really good at executing a summary of qualification and revising resumes on their own and don't even need my feedback before submitting for applications. So they get better over time and they get more confident over time. So giving themselves permission to practice and to be imperfect can really help you become more confident in the process as well. People get jobs without being perfect. So I hope that is a takeaway today. Some things here that help our clients take imperfect action. So if you're someone who really struggles with rejection and fear of rejection, you could have a challenge for yourself to get rejected like 10 times. And then you'd have to apply for at least 10 jobs. So that's been something we've done in our community before, is just have like a rejection challenge as a way to kind of incentivize people to make peace with a little bit of rejection that's going to happen in the process. But on the backside, you get the benefit of getting to customize your resume, learn how to be more efficient, and actually give yourself 10 chances to also not be rejected, which is another way to look at it. Having support and encouragement. I mean, there's a reason that we have group calls in our program, and it's just a good opportunity for people to reset and get feedback and share their fears. And that's where other people can chime in and share their experiences and their tips, and we can share a little perspective and advice so that people have something they can be confident in executing. And I always say this, like the best kind of resume, in fact, people probably know if they've been to multiple pep talks here, the best kind of resume is a submitted resume. A resume that is just on your desktop or somewhere in Google Drive isn't going to get you a new job. So it does have to be submitted. So all of the strategy in the world won't matter if you're not hitting submit. So I always say, if you're in doubt and you're worried about your resume strategy and you know the job is closing, just apply, just submit. It's better than nothing. And it's actually worked for clients. So it's not my favorite strategy, but it is a way to just give yourself a chance to explore that opportunity and put yourself forward that otherwise that otherwise won't exist, right? Like no one's going to consider you if you don't apply. Now, before I wrap up this step, I just want to, take a soapbox a moment, if you'll all humor me. I know that people come to us to land new jobs. Like I totally get that. That's what we're known for. I love that. But I have a secret goal for everyone who works with us. And it's not just to help them land a new job, but it's to help them unlearn all of the behaviors and beliefs that they've come to learn from the toxic work environments. And then they bring those kind of behaviors and beliefs into their job search process. So this idea that like your resume isn't good enough, or you're afraid to show people your work because your work gets criticized, or you never, hear anything good about your work, or you start to think you're not good enough, or you don't receive any affirmation at work. And so you're really unclear about your value. We all are where we are in our careers, and you're here because you want to do better with your job search and move into a different kind of work environment, hopefully a more aligned work environment. And that's fantastic. Most people don't take that step. So if you are struggling to get some of this done or feeling like you should always be doing more, like there's a chance that you learn that at a job you didn't like. And so I encourage you to think like, could I let some of these beliefs go and experiment with some new ideas and tools as a way, not just to land a new job, but to like really unplug myself from some of these unhealthy work environments that you may have found yourself in. I know I sure did. Okay. I have 7. Georgette, do you have seven resumes? I didn't see when that came in. Let me just see here. There's a lot of comments. I recently had an interview with a company I thought had the values I wanted, but the people interviewing me did not reflect that. So when I was being honest, not to impress, I didn't make the 3rd round. And not surprised. Honestly, I applaud this 100%. I think it's great to recognize like we're not on the same page, and it doesn't mean that you can't have a polite professional conversation or even a relationship. But it means that you have drawn a boundary for yourself, and your search will continue so that you can find something that's a better fit. So I love this. I see a few, I actually don't use ATS tools when I write resumes for clients, and I haven't for the last 7 years. Because when I was in recruiting and hiring, I understand how people use those systems. So it's not always like, it's not really as simple as some people online make it sound. Most resumes are reviewed by humans if they're reviewed. So it's really important to write for humans. I see a lot of resumes, and I fix a lot of resumes that sound like they're written for bots. And I don't prefer that style personally. Let's see. It's always a good idea to be yourself. If you don't get the job by yourself, then the job was not for you. I really think there's some element of truth here that's really important. You got to be yourself. You have to own what you want to do. You shouldn't, necessarily take on a ton of responsibilities that you don't want to do. So I think having those 7 rejections, oh my gosh, that's awesome, Jordan. See, this is what we celebrate. That's fantastic. Yes, Trisha, this will be recorded. We're going to celebrate this. That's right. Congratulations, Georgette. That's awesome. The good news is, like, you gave yourself 7 chances, and actually you've done some rejecting too, as I'm recalling here. So with rejection, I think can feel really, really scary, but I hope that especially doing this in a group context, you can normalize some of that. Candidates do rejecting too, and it's always really good to try and stay in the mix if it's something you're interested in. It can be disappointing to be rejected, of course, but also, sometimes it's good to walk away from things if you see a lot of red flags. She had a client use the phrase yellow flags, which I will start using, because not everything is a red flag, but it's like pay attention here and think about it a little bit more. Okay, so the next piece here is care. So I want to talk a little bit about this, because this has actually been part of our process for like 6 years, almost 5 years. And it's taken on new meaning in the last year and a half, obviously. So I just want to say a little bit about why I think care work belongs in our process. I remember a client once telling me, "I'm so sorry that I didn't do my homework between calls. My kid got sick and I had to go to the ER." And I just thought, like, this person took her child to the ER, her sick child to the ER, and she's apologizing for me. And I said back, "It sounds like you made a good decision for yourself. Sounds like that was the right thing to do." But she felt really bad and then felt behind. And I know how frustrating it can be to not be where you want to be. But I also think that in a process that where we're trying to kind of restore some healthy work-life expectations and balance, then we can, like, there's a time to consciously give ourselves permission to switch into care mode and take care of kids, take care of elders, take care of our community, take care of ourselves. And so I want to talk a little bit about, like, why I think this is so key, in case it's not totally self-evident, which I hope it is just a little bit. This past year, people have been challenged by lack of childcare, not being able to, leave their homes. They've been called to work the polls, protest for racial justice, write to their senators. Like, there's a lot going on for people. And who am I to be like, no, focus solely on your job search? Obviously, people have a different sense of urgency and a different sense of priorities. And so we want people to get really clear on what theirs are so that they can honor that set of priorities. But I also believe, to my core, after doing this for so long, that when your job search is strategic, it can take up a lot less time. That doesn't mean you have to spend less time, but sometimes there just isn't 40 hours a week or 20 or 10 or even 5 jobs a week to apply for. And so you really want to think, how am I spending my time? How can I be efficient? And this process has allowed people to be efficient and selective about how they've spent their time, because they're sending out high quality applications to selective number of, like, intentional opportunities. They're not all over the place. They're not having to second guess themselves. And that saves a ton of time and energy. There's only so many hours in the day, but when you have great strategy and great assets for your job search, like a good resume, template or two, how to use the summary of qualifications, those sorts of things, you have a lot more flexibility and nimbleness in your job search process. So what a lot of our clients say is like, I actually spend less time applying for jobs because they're able to kind of better manage. And like, we ask people to give themselves permission to care. In fact, if you're someone who starts working with us and you're so burned out and exhausted that you don't even know how you're going to have the bandwidth for a job search, we don't start by fixing your resume. We start by making changes to your schedule because not only do we believe care is important, but like rest is important. It helps produce better work. It's something you deserve as a human being. And we want to help you, again, kind of unlearn any unhelpful practices you may have absorbed in your career at work and learn to job search in a way that's going to feel like a really good job one day. Just to wrap up here, one other thing I'll say is that this is why I love to encourage people to start before they're ready. The longer of a timeline you can give me, or give your search rather, what it really means is that you don't have that sense of urgency that could be, compelling you to apply for more and more jobs. More jobs can sometimes happen. Like we have some candidates, clients right now who like have a lot of opportunities they can pursue, but for the most people that if there isn't just a windfall in their line of work. So if you can give yourself a long enough runway, start before you're ready, it'll be much easier to balance these other pieces of your life at the same time. Oh, let's see. What do you think about cover letters? I think a lot of career coaches feel the same way. We like cover letters. Is it necessary? So let me say why I like cover letters. Just going back to the revision step, or maybe imperfect action even. I'm well aware that like lots of people don't read cover letters. But I think hiring managers are more likely to read cover letters than recruiters. And for a lot of my clients, I think it's advantageous to demonstrate your writing and communication skills, share a little bit more about your story, and give a little bit more context to your work. So is it necessary? They're usually not required, but I do think it provides more context. And some hiring managers won't, consider you unless you are actually completing all pieces of the application. So if we don't know who those people are in advance, which we often don't, I think to be on the safer side, a cover letter is a good idea. This is a really great question, Raina. I think this is so fun. This also has to do with, I think, revision and communicating effectively. So your resume needs to be customized, and your LinkedIn summary, right, needs to work for the breadth of the roles that you're applying for more often than not. So one thing that I like to do is to kind of, I get really granular as I can in the resume writing process. But when it comes to LinkedIn, I like to think more high level, more thematic. Are people nonprofit professionals with experience in strategic planning, organizational development, and management? Are they, instructional designers with interest in, organizational development or curriculum development, right? Like I try to pick bigger pieces of the pie, so to speak, and just get a little bit less granular. I'm happy to chat more about that. But this is something we work with a lot on clients because it's kind of like an art more than a science. All right, so let's talk about the final piece here, which is connection. So I already said this, I'm going to say it again because it's worth repeating. The job search is about communication and interaction. Nobody gets a job without these things. It's really, really critical. To that end, we don't think it makes a lot of sense to job search all on your own. Connection in your job search can mean getting in touch and having your references be up to date. It can mean having accountability and encouragement. It can mean having co-working buddies. It can mean people being willing to share their resources, knowledge, and network and put your resume in front of the hiring manager. It can mean so much, and all of those pieces add value to your job search and also your life, because who doesn't enjoy interactions with good people here? So that's what I think is really critical, is to not be doing this process alone. And I know that because the job search process is so up and down and involves so much rejection, people don't necessarily love to like broadcast that they're job searching, which I totally get. But I think there's a difference between like letting your close friends and former colleagues and mentors know what you're looking for, and, you know, putting out a broadcast announcement, which you don't necessarily need to do, and maybe can't do because maybe you don't want your boss to know, and all of that sort of things. The thing about doing this work collectively is that, you know, you knock the networking part right out of the back. Like, it's so much easier to network if you just agree to do things in a group of people. And you realize that you have shared challenges, and you hear how other people have dealt with things. And like I've said, there's a lot of good ways to deal with things. People have different personalities and comfort levels. So I love it when, you know, we spend time in office hours or in our private community, like brainstorming, like, here's what I would do. Maybe you could modify it or try this. I just think it's really good for people to hear from a range of folks, and to allow themselves to receive support as part of this process. It's more fun, and I just think it's more effective in the end to do this work in the company of other people, to keep people up to date, to let people know what you're working on and towards. And at the end of the day, people hire people, people encourage people, people network with other people. Like, as I'm saying this, I'm hoping you're realizing, like, this is work that should be done collectively. Job searching alone is just not going to do your job search any favors. Yes, Susanna. I like it when people agree with me. That's great. I write cover letters, but I have to guess at. So let me put this up here. I actually don't think Dear Hiring Manager is the worst thing here. I think there's like, this feels like a little bit of like mildly outdated advice. I don't think guessing the hiring manager wins you a ton of points. It might be easy for you to figure out who the hiring manager is, or you might know. And in which case, if you have that knowledge, I think that's okay. But I would use Dear Hiring Manager myself if I was unsure. And if I were unsure, I would prefer to use this rather than guess and be wrong, to be totally honest. Because sometimes it's confusing when people are wrong. All right, we have one more piece. We're coming back around the bend here. So hopefully, there we go. All right. So hopefully we're excited to come all the way full circle, literally here. We're going to talk about assessment. So if you have any questions about anything, now is the time to drop them in the chat, because this is the last step here. So this is the last call for questions, but I want to chat too, before we wrap up, about what to do when you've started some of this process, and how to come back to the reflection phase without feeling like you haven't made any progress. And my favorite way to do that is to make sure we're documenting our work along the way, and to ask ourselves clear questions. So, are you applying for jobs? How many? Have you tracked it? Have you had interview requests? And for people who are more exploratory, who are maybe like, I'm not ready to dive into the job search process yet, I want you to think, are you building relationships? Are you clearer about what you want? What have you learned? Maybe you need a more open question like that. I think writing this down, whether you have like a spreadsheet that tracks the jobs you've applied for and the interviews you've had, or whether you're on a more exploratory end. For all of my clients who are doing career exploration, we write down what their insights and takeaways are, because I think we all have moments of doubt where people kind of like forget or get disoriented and are like, what am I doing? What have I learned? I've just wasted a lot of time. And so when we have things written down, when we have those moments of self-doubt, we can kind of come back to the data and say, well, what have we learned? Well, we've learned that that kind of job isn't going to work for us. So what does that leave on the table? What did I hear that was compelling? What feels promising? And I just can't emphasize enough how important I think it is to write this down. This is your work. This is your career. And so if you just kind of keep it all in your head, it's prone to whatever else is going on in your head. And sometimes we just want to be able to look and see the work that we've done. There's also an opportunity here to consider expanding or reducing the scope of roles. So sometimes my clients will realize there are some kind of companies or some roles where I'm getting a lot of traction. I'm going to double down there. If you are getting a lot of traction with networking, maybe you spend more time putting your energy into that part of your job search rather than applying cold. This is a chance to retool your strategy, to go into the revision stage again with kind of a fresh plan. And there's nothing wrong with giving yourself, permission to switch gears a little bit if you have a better sense of what's going to work for you. It's also an opportunity to check in and make sure that you're generating opportunities for yourself. And that's why I always say like communication and interaction are so important, because it's very hard to generate opportunities keeping things to yourself. So keep track of the conversations, and make sure that you're giving yourself, credit for doing that outreach work. And it can take a while for job applications to turn into interviews. It can take a while to follow up with networking people, but do write down and document what you're doing, and try to be honest about whether you think these are fruitful discussions. Are these good long-term people in your network? Were they just one-off conversations? One-off conversations, by the way, are totally okay. But I think it also just makes sense to, keep that in perspective. These maybe aren't people you would call on for additional help, but it may be part of your plan to build and nurture those relationships so that, they could be down the line. Lots of opportunities. And this is really an opportunity here to focus on the ones that feel like they're going to serve you best. So as much as I say, like, don't skip starting with reflection, I'm also going to kindly ask that you don't skip assessing. I sometimes have to say to my clients, I don't know what's going to work for you. I mean, I have some good guesses because I've done this job search thing with people for like 7 years. But I think, like, in terms of the specifics, I don't know which of your references or people in your network are going to be super useful. I don't know which job you apply for, you're going to hear back. So it's really important that we take some action and treat this as an iterative process and then reassess and see. And if we don't do that, if we don't give ourselves the benefit of trying something and tracking it, then we don't have any information at all. And we're just purely guessing. And we'd love to avoid as much, of a guessing game as possible here. And give yourself permission to have clear evidence. I think that is so critical, so that you can always come back here. All right. I'm going to take a question that I have here. I connected with a recruiter of a company to ask who is the hiring manager for the post. He told me to apply via their website and they will look into my application. There were already 200 applications as per LinkedIn. I am not surprised that you got this advice. That's why I put this up here. I think that this is pretty normal. Like, a lot of times, for some reason, people have it in their heads that like going and connecting with people through LinkedIn can be really helpful. And it can be, but a lot of times for like compliance reasons, like it's really critical to go through the hiring process. And that means submitting your application on their website. I have not seen people have a lot of luck applying directly through LinkedIn. Let me know in the comments if you have. I occasionally hear from someone, but from my client's perspective, they get jobs primarily applying through company websites or, through connections. Let's see. What if you are considering a career or industry change? Would your assessment process change? Good question. It depends on the nature of the change, I would say, right? So like, are you going into a field that's like highly regulated with like very specific, educational requirements? Because if that's the case, like if you're trying to become like a dentist or a vet tech or like a dental hygienist or a CPA, like there's like a series of things that you have to do to have these jobs. You're welcome. But what I think, for most people, a ton of additional education isn't required. So for most people, what I would do is help them really unpack and document their experience and spend a lot of time looking at job postings with them to try to figure out kind of the best route to make that transition. For a lot of people, what I tend to see is, and this depends again on the nature of the transition. So like, this is very abstract for me. What I want you to think about is what are your transferable skills? Is this a more technical role than what you have previously? In which case, additional education, even like upskilling, that kind of thing may be helpful. But if it's not a technical transition and it's just like a different industry, then your soft skills are often a really good way to pivot. And I have seen so many job postings that just require soft skills. So that would be something, depending on kind of where you fell on that spectrum, those would be some opportunities that I would encourage you to explore. Yay, thank you for sharing. Use the reference option. Well, that is a different strategy. Yes, I would say so. I agree, Sharon, but thank you for sharing that. I always love to hear people who have different experience. I don't figure out keywords. I have a series of lives that I did. I did a whole month of lives on resumes. So I think you can go and look at them. If you search for Work Wonders events, you should be able to find them. I don't figure out keywords. I don't write resumes for keywords. I write resumes for people who are doing the hiring. And I speak to their needs and derive a lot of the language that I use from the job posting and specifically the summary of qualifications. So go back and watch some of those earlier lives because I think it will probably give you some more insight. I just don't think the keyword thing is a thing. I'm sorry to say. I fall into the humans are still reading your resume. There's something to keep in mind because I think it's so hard to convey this to people who haven't worked on the HR side of things before. The volume of applicants right now is huge. It's totally possible people are not fully getting through their pool of candidates, but it's to assess them and decide if they should be included in a first round. But it's also possible that has nothing to do with the applicant tracking system and has everything to do with the magnitude of the volume of candidates. So I want you to just kind of keep that in mind. To that end, what I do find slightly beneficial is applying early. My husband does recruiting, and we were talking about this a couple of weeks ago. And, I think he said, I can pay much more attention to the applications that come in the first 5 days of a posting. And that's why I encourage people, again, to apply early, practice this before you need to, be prepared, because what matters here is that you get comfortable with the strategy so that when the right job comes up, you can be an early applicant. Okay. I have accepted an offer letter from a company and completed a background. I have tried. Wow. I'm really sorry to hear that, Gary. I can't say I've never heard of that before. I have actually heard of people getting ghosted before. So I don't know if the company is still in business or what's happening there. I don't know if you had a question for me. I just feel really bad that that's the case. That does not seem like the right thing to do. And that's unfortunately is not completely abnormal, people experiencing something that they shouldn't. Recruiters have people too, and some of them have a really hard time delivering bad news. So if things changed, or if the needs changed, or if the budget changed, you are certainly entitled to an explanation. But sometimes we don't get what we deserve. My husband says, deserve has nothing to do with it. All right, so I'm happy to put out a last call for questions, but I want to invite all of you who are here right now, and if you're watching the replay, to consider joining us in the Spring Job Search Accelerator. I'm really excited for this because we are bringing people together for a month of intensive job search work. So each week you're going to get time to ask questions and feedback when you join office hours with me. So I'll be answering folks' questions during our office hours calls for 4 weeks. You'll get chance for your resume or cover letter or LinkedIn to be reviewed each week as part of our rapid review process, where I will be looking at your materials and giving feedback on how you can optimize them. We also do virtual co-working every single week with our team. So Nicole, who's here, and Jen O'Neill, Dr. Jen, will be hosting those. Actually, I'm going to be hosting a couple of those too, which I'm excited about. And we also have a private community where you can ask questions between calls and get to know the other folks who are job searching with us. And it's a really, really, really fantastic group of people over there. Everyone's very eager to connect and chat. And there's people who've made tremendous progress in the last few months who will have a lot of insight to share. You'll also get access to the Job Search Ready webinar series and our workbook with templates and exercises. So if you aren't on our mailing list, please come over with me, Nicole. I love that. Please join us over on workwonderscoaching.com. Make sure you're on our mailing list. The email to register is going out tomorrow. And if you register before April 23rd, I'm hosting a special office hours just for early bird registrants. So you could have a small group coaching session with me before we even get started. So please join us there. And if you're already on our list, please be on the lookout for that email tomorrow. We're excited to open up registration. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. And I hope you all have a really, really good week. It's sunny here in Boston. I don't think it's going to stay that way, but a girl can dream. If you have any other questions here, please. Oh, actually, Trisha just asked one. If a job is posted and taken down the next day, not necessarily. It's not. Usually, there's like a mistake in the requisition when it's up for that. Oops. What did I do here? I lost your question. Sorry, Trisha. Usually when it's up and down just like that, there's a mistake and it might be reposted. So just keep your eye out there. It may come back. Thanks, Nicole. Thank you, Jonathan. I hope to hear from you all. Thanks, Lisa. Have a really good week, guys.